Hello, everyone. Welcome to one more React Roundup episode. I'll be your host today. My name is Lucas Reis, and in our panel we have Thomas Aylott.
Hello.
Dave Ceddia.
Hey, everybody.
And Leslie Cohn-Wein.
Hey, y'all.
Our guest for the day is Bruno Lourenco.
Hello. Nice pronunciation of my name.
Yes, I don't know if I can speak English properly, but my Portuguese is really good.
Do you ever wonder how your application gets put onto the devices that it runs on? Whether it's a mobile app being run on an iPhone or Android phone, or whether you're talking about a web app that gets deployed to servers or containers through something like Kubernetes, there's always something going on, and understanding how all that stuff goes together can drastically help you figure out how to solve the problems and how to architecture your application better in order to take advantage of how things are set up. You should check out our new podcast, Adventures in Devops. Adventures in Devops is a sort of continuation of the Food Fight Show, but is a new podcast. You can find it at adventuresindevopspodcast.com.
Okay, so Bruno, tell us a little bit more about your background.
Okay, so I'm a front-end developer, and I work at Chineta, and my background comes from multimedia. So I started with video, image, photography, and also web and animation. So I started with Flash, so that's why I enjoy animation so much. And currently I'm building websites and web apps on daily basis.
Nice, that's great. And so you've been working with React, and that's what inspired you to create a React animation library?
Yes, exactly. I really like React, and I think it simplifies things a lot. And since we define here as a company and from other companies that I work, we define React as the main framework. I started creating some tools to simplify our job. So that's why I decided to create React Morphe to simplify the creation of animations.
So for those that don't know, I just saw your Finland talk just a second ago. What is the React Morphe thing? Because I've never seen anything exactly like that in web development before. So it might be a new concept to people. Can you kind of just describe what that does?
Yes, exactly. So my goal was to simplify the creation of animations. And if we think about it, every time that we need to animate something, we have the state A and the state B. It's always like that. But when we want to create a web animation, it's super hard because there are a lot of things going on. We need to use maths to calculate the distance, position. Sometimes we need to calculate the width or the height of the element. Then there is a lot of states like this appears, where should I handle the state? So there's a lot of things going on. But in the other hand, animation is so cool. People used to love it. And when we have a nice website, the ones that earns awards, they all have a lot of animation. So my goal was we need to simplify that. We need to create a better way to create animations. And one specific type of animation that is super hard to create is when we have two different pages. Because if you have one page and then you want to animate something and create a smooth transition to another page, then we need to deal to two different pages, maybe two different components, and then maybe the style is not matching. So there's a lot of things going on. So my goal with React Morphe was, what if we can simply tag the first component and the last component? And then magically, this package could create a transition for us. So that was my goal. And then I decided, what is the best API to do this? And I started with the API without any code. So I started I started creating maybe, do I like this or no? This should be simpler. By the way, the first version I was using render props, which was quite new. So I was, maybe this will solve our problem. And I started creating a version with render props, but wasn't the right approach. So then when hooks come up, I realized, this could simplify things a lot. And then this is the concept. I have an object that I will spread in my first element. And then I'm spreading...
Like a JavaScript object.
Like a JavaScript object,
okay.
exactly. That will have all the things it's necessary, all the bindings, things that will calculate the size of the element. And then we spread again the same object in a different element. And then in order to handle the state, another big topic in React world, I just leaving that to any implementation. Basically, if the element enters the DOM, then I will trigger the animation. So basically, that's the main concept. You have the state A, state B. You tag your first element, you tag the last element. And as soon as the element comes into the view, it will morph. That's why it's called React Morph, because you will try to transform one element into the other. Of course, this is fake. There is no real morphing element changing into another element. But basically, we are fading in, fading out two elements at the same time. And then it creates the illusion that we have a smooth transition.
Yeah, I think that's where I was really excited about the way that you were doing it, because like I've done kind of morphing animations before back in my, my CSS only days. And it was always such a huge pain because you had to like change the way that I structure the HTML to allow it to have both states with the same exact HTML, being able to, switch class names on and off or whatever. But the way that you've engineered this is like both implementations don't have to both state A and state B of the animation don't have to know about each other at all.
Yes.
That was really, really interesting.
If I'm not mistaken, you're using the flip animation technique right under the hood. Yeah, I remember when I saw it's a technique to create this type of animations. How does the flip animation technique work?
So basically it's called flip because it's inverting the order that we animate, but it's quite simple. So first we need to calculate the elements positions and the size. And so always we have to have two states, right? So we have the first state and then the last state. And we then invert, so we get the last state and we put on top of the initial state. And then we play the animation. Yeah, and this is what React Morph is doing. So when we have one element in the page and then the other element comes in, I'm moving just using GPU accelerated props like transforms and scale. I'm moving the last position on top of the first position. And then I'm playing both together while one is fading in and the other is fading out. So it looks that they are transforming one to the other. And if they are very similar, let's say that we have a thumbnail image and then we have a bigger image, it will be like seamless. Or if we have a small text and then a bigger text, it will fool our brains. And that's why I also like this topic about the brain perception, because if you just can fool the user, and if we can create a good illusion, that's our goal. It doesn't matter the technique that we use. The goal is to just get the right illusion.
And I love that the style of animations that this makes really, really easy is the same style of animation that both Apple and Google's material design are using a lot, which is when you're transitioning between two screens, any elements that are semantically the same are kind of cross-fading and smooshing between each other. Like navigating a nested hierarchy in like an iOS app or whatever, when you transition between the pages, like the title at the top, the title morphs into the back button, and then the back button morphs into the title, and then again. So you could very easily achieve that with React Morph.
Exactly, and that's one of the main goals, because you can have a button component being morphed to a heading component or heading element or even heading HTML tag. And this is only possible because I'm not really animating the original elements. Because if you have to animate the original elements, then you can have some issues, because maybe that element has some specific styling, maybe it has already some translations and could have some conflicts there. And there is another thing, because if we change, let's say you are using a router and then you change from one page to the other, the elements will be unmounted for the page. So
yeah, that's like
gone,
the killer feature, because when you transition between pages, there's nothing you can do. You have no clue what is even on the next page.
Exactly. So you don't know what is on the next page, and the previous page is gone, and you cannot animate it anymore. So another big trick of React Morph is that as soon that I start the animating, I create a clone. I duplicate the element and I position exactly in the same position where the original is. So then the original element can be gone, can be lost, and then I will animate this clone. So that's the solution that I found to have both states at the same time.
Oh, that's really cool. So is the clone actually like a React element clone, or is it just like pretty much a snapshot of like what it looks like in the browser?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because that's maybe one of the issues of React Morph. I'm not using the React itself to like create the clone element from React, but I'm cloning the DOM element itself.
Yeah, so, that seems better actually, because it would work for like any library.
And then if you wanted to like port it to React Native, you wouldn't have to do some wacky stuff in the React realm. You'd just re-implement the same API.
Yeah, but maybe that's the bigger issue, because I'm relying on the DOM. So I'm duplicating DOM elements, and we don't have a DOM on React Native.
Right.
So by duplicating the DOM, it's easier, because then you don't have any synthetic events. You don't need to care about that. I'm using pointer event none, so it's not interfering with your application. So you can animate that, but then it has this downside that maybe it's not so easy to port to React Native, because I'm relying a lot on the DOM itself.
Yeah, I think that in React Native, you'd want to have a different implementation anyway, because you'd want to rely on the hardware acceleration of the actual UI view under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the core brilliance of it is nailing the API. So I really liked the way that you designed this API first. Like I got into test-driven development back in like the Ruby on Rails days, 2005 or whatever. And then after I moved into like JavaScript, I started doing like README first development, where I wrote up documentation for an API that doesn't exist with some usage examples that don't exist. And I'm like, wait, this API sucks. Let me change it.
That's a good idea. I remember thinking about that a few years ago too, and I was like, wish-driven development would be a great name for this. I think I ever read a post for it or anything, but it's like write it the way you want to write the final code, and then kind of reverse engineer.
I remember there was some blog article I read that was like README first development and like announcing this new thing. I was like, yes, I'm going to do that.
This is interesting, because it's like if someone wrote this library to me, like how I would like it to be. So you start from there, right? Because like interfaces, they don't change that easily. We like to think on software that like, oh, we just change. We can change a little bit. No, an interface will be with you for years and years. I could even say it's going to stay with you forever. It's just
Good Tools is still hanging around.
That's it. It's just like really difficult. Yeah. And if you put some constraints, like it needs to be backwards compatible, you end up with JavaScript have dot substring and dot subster, which are a little bit different.
Yeah.
And they're both there.
Yeah, but my goal was simplify. I wanted to simplify a lot, because I realized that when something is simple, then people start using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have more animations on the web, because it solves a lot of problems. It's not just amazing the user, that's also a good goal, but solves a lot of problems, even design problems. Animation it's a powerful tool, because so this kind of animation, when you transform one thing into another, let's say adding something to a card, or you're moving from one page to the other, that's reduce the cognitive load, because the user knows that, oh, this is going there. And this is like built into the brain already. And we don't need to explain. Sometimes it happens that you click something and if for some reason you look away or something, then you don't know what happened here. So the user can be lost. But if you add the right animations, you can solve a lot of problems.
Yes, I tried to find here a post I read about this a while ago, but I could not find if Yeah, I will try to see if I post it later. I read an article about that when we talk about UI and UX, sometimes we think about these states, static states, right? And how we're going to communicate what's happening here. And this article talk about these animations in terms of like they are telling the story to the user, even though there's nothing like particular in the UI. So an example they had was like an email editor, something like that you could save a draft. So you have a button of drafts that were saved. How do you communicate to the user that button is going to show the draft? That's a really tough problem to solve. But if you click on save draft and the actual window like morphs into that button, you already explained everything. Your button doesn't need to have much more now that, like the animation told a story to the user. Sometimes we think about animations as like flashy things, no pun intended, but like things that are just there to make sparkles and they're actually not important. But I think that if they're well used, they can improve on mobile devices that we have smaller screens and we cannot put a lot of information in those pixels. Animation is super important to have a good user experience.
Yeah. Like there's the problem of change blindness when there's like a flash in the screen and something's changed in between the flash and before and after, just the human mind just can't pick up the difference, because in reality that never happens. Things don't just suddenly appear in real life.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I really like this topic about how the brain and how we perceive animation, because sometimes we can create an animation and looks good, and then we can create another animation and we are like, man, I don't like this, but we cannot really explain why. It's just a feeling. But if you try to dig a little bit more, and I did some research in this matter, and it's interesting that if you know some principles, then you can apply it into your animation. So with React Morph, you can create easily this Morph animation, but with great powers comes great responsibility, right? So if we provide a tool to a user to create things easily, it's cool because then you can use and create new patterns and solve different problems, but also we can give the tools to make it wrong. And if we, in a single animation, if we have a lot of things going in multiple directions, this could be worse than no animation. So yeah, it's good to understand how the things works, how our brain perceives things. And like you said, in the real world, it's always good to compare to the real world because our brain is tied to this. So in real world, we have things that moves, we have physics, we have nothing is instantaneous, right? So it's always good to beforehand, when you are planning the design of your application or website, to see where can I use animation in a functional way? How can I use animation to solve my problems and help to simplify my user experience? Because that's the main goal at the end, to create good apps or good websites.
I think one of my favorite parts of your talk from React Finland was the slide where you were showing vectors and sort of comparing it against some animation examples, right? And so when you start to see vectors, right, directional movement happening in multiple kind of directions, I guess, it can confuse the eye, right? And that's where it starts to get overwhelming and you can't really follow. There's not like a clear purpose of the animation. That was like a really nice, clear way to kind of show an animation that might work versus something that starts to get confusing.
Yes, because I made that mistake when I created the first version of React Morph. One of the examples, I have things going all the direction. And it looks good, but you feel like, I don't know what's happening here. And it's important to know what you are doing, because this topic about the vectors, if we create too many directions, or if we have big parts of the screen being moved, this not only could be annoying, but can also have some people with could feel sick. And
my mother has that. Like if there's a lot of movement on the screen, she gets physically unwell.
Exactly. So it's a very important topic. And we as a developers, we have this responsibility. We don't want that someone start feeling sick just because it's not
right.
correct.
There's even a media feature now, right? In CSS, it's like prefers reduced motion.
Exactly.
Really?
Eliminate that. Yeah.
That's the first I've ever heard of that. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's essentially like just a CSS media feature that you can toggle on and off, and you can basically say reduce any non-essential motion.
In your CSS, you can say like if someone chose that, just like apply these different CSS rules. It's a good accessibility issue too that we don't.
I'll have to open a pull request.
We don't hear.
Disable React Morph if setting.
Yeah.
So even people that has this condition, they still like to see some animations because small.
But you have to be very careful with them. I like the one that you use where you just like animated the icon in between screens. Like there's an icon big in the center and then it became small in the corner. Like I don't think that sort of thing has the same effect.
Yeah, but some things that we could have in mind is that animation that is really a no-no is when we have a big portion of the screen being moved. We should avoid that. And we should avoid big things, and it's always related to the screen, no matter if it's a small screen or a bigger screen, and the distance that this thing does. So I think right now it's quite common sense that if you need to animate something, we don't need to animate from 0 to 100. We can animate just to 80 or 90 to 100 because the animation looks better, but also solve that problem because people that suffer of this condition, they can really feel sick if big portions of the screen is moving. Another thing, so one thing is not avoid big portions of the screen. Another thing is shortening the vectors. So avoid big distance and try to align all the vectors in one direction. So that's also helps to reduce the cognitive load. And another thing is that we should avoid rotations. And this
really?
The explanation is quite simple because the way that we work, our brain work, we rotate our head like side to side, up, down, but we never rotate our head, right? And when we do like this, maybe we are in a boat or something. And when we are in a boat, we got sick, right?
Yeah.
Yes. That makes so much sense.
Even when you rotate your head, like your eyes keep everything else steady. So if something is forcing everything to rotate without you,
I just bobbled my head and now I feel unwell. Thanks a lot.
So you can relate.
Yeah.
I've developed empathy.
Yeah, so that's a big topic that we also need to consider and has these two effects. We can help people with this condition and also make better animations more pleasant to everyone.
Do you think we don't we don't see a lot of this happening because tooling is not that good? Like, I don't think there's I've never worked with like a good tool to communicate animation intention between designers and devs. And it's also, even inside the dev world, we have some options of libraries now that do animation, but it's still not trivial. Maybe React Morph is a really good option for this particular type of animation. But do you think this helped shaping how we deal with animation, which is almost very immature way of dealing with this today?
Yeah. In my company, we have some task force that we are trying to improve that communication between devs and designers. We are trying to educate our designers and even the client, because sometimes the client, they say, oh, I don't want to pay that. If we have some time, maybe we can add some animation because it's cool. But it's not that way. We need to understand why animation is important, when should we add to our project? When should we start thinking about animations? And then these kind of things, what kind of animation we should avoid? What kind of animations it's better for our user experience? So the same thing that we do for, like, let's say colors, typography, we should think in the same way for animations. And it's true, we need more tools. Right now, we have great design tools like Figma, Sketch. But then when it comes to animation, it's hard. There is no great tool. Now Figma released the plugin system. I saw some plugins that you can create animations inside Figma, which is great. But it's always like two different steps. You design your app and then, let me animate this part.
Yeah.
Would be better to have a better tool that integrate everything. And then
Framer,
even if you have a design, I tried Framer, but even Framer, it's the other way around. You need to code it first, add anything there, and then the designers, they need to use. But if it's something new that the designer is trying to test with the user, and maybe they need to do this, not the developer. So I think we are going the right direction. We have Framer, now we have this plugin system. We have Principle, like simple softwares that we can
Principle's nice.
prototype. Yeah, because it's simple. You can prototype something quite fast. So this is good. But it's always something a part of the main process. And when or who should do this, it's something that I didn't figure out yet. It's a work in progress. I don't think there is a solution. So
we used to use After Effects. Our designers would go off in After Effects at the agency, and then they'd come to us, and then you'd build like a working prototype, and then you'd sit together, right? And that was like the only way that you could kind of work together, I guess, collaborate on what it was going to be like. But I mean, it's exhausting, right? It's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, at Facebook, there was a huge portion of the designers that were using Quartz Composer, and then they actually built their own kind of competitor to Quartz Composer called Facebook Origami that lets you design with gestures and animations in mind from the beginning. But it's just a completely different way of designing that it hasn't really taken off.
Yeah, that's almost like visual programming, that tool. I've played with it a little bit, and it's tricky to wrap your head around.
It is.
I think that's part of the issue with animation in general, is that it's kind of a paradigm shift or something. Like I think it's similar to, if you've played with something like Sketch or MS Paint or whatever, you can like draw boxes and drag them around, and then you're stuck in CSS and you're like, okay, now how do I drag the boxes around? And that's just not how you think in CSS. And I think like animation is the same kind of thing, where you think of it as like, oh, okay, when, on the start trigger, I want to move this thing to a new position, and it doesn't really work that way. And every tool kind of does it differently, and they change the mental model. And so it's a tricky problem, I think.
That's where Morphe is so useful, because it's most of these tools and doing it manually, we've been kind of stuck thinking that we have to actually do it for real, using the real elements. But with Morphe, you're faking it, but faking it is really what you want.
Yeah, it's true.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
Some tools like After Effects, they can do a lot, but maybe they do more that we can actually do on the web. So it's hard to do with this. But maybe something that can help to connect both ends. It's something that is quite popular now, is the design system. So something that is helping both worlds, the developer world and the design world, is when you define a system, then everybody's following the same. So if you define all your colors, your typography beforehand, and then you just need to set the same system in your website, and then everything's more consistent. So we could do something similar with animations. We can define some durations, some easings, some custom functions, or we can define that, let's say, these common patterns. And then we can just apply it in our code. So let's say we have a way to transition two elements. So let's say we are using React Morph to transition one element to the other. By the way, React Morph is using a Spring with Spring values. So if we define beforehand that this kind of movement has this and this and this attributes, then it's easier to then, even though you can still be using Principle, After Effects, or whatever, we can still communicate in a common way. So maybe the solution could be on that direction. And yeah, we are trying to solve and try to find solutions regarding that as well. Yeah, we can see some big companies doing that. IBM, they have a really nice style guide online where they define all their system, and they have also a motion section. We have material design with the motion with some principles. But this could be part of the way that we work together with designers.
A big part of it is just making it easier. Making it easier makes it less expensive. Making it less expensive makes it, not a big deal. So instead of getting punished for wasting a lot of time on animations, people might actually get praised for spending a little bit of time on animations. A lot of it is just the expectations of the job, of changing the expectations to start to make it a new expectation that there is going to be some animation.
I think some of it also, right, is learning some of those kind of principles that, Bruno, that you covered in your talk, understanding, right, how the brain is interpreting animation, what actually is useful to a user to see, and is creating meaning and purpose as opposed to just, a slick effect. But that's education, I think, on all of us and on the industry. It's a big shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
As soon as something is really easy, there'll be like a lot of overuse. And like I just can think of GeoCities in the beginning of like when everybody everybody had access to HTML and everything, and I was like, oh my god, everything had that marquee go with their name.
Playing MIDI.
And everything was blinking. Every paragraph had a different font. Like as soon as it gets like super easy, I think there'll be a bunch of overuse. So yeah, it's on us.
I rendered my GeoCities site in 3D using Pavre.
Whoa. There's a whole generation that started on GeoCities and those things, right? Like animated GIFs was like my jam. I had probably one animated GIF for everything.
Hey, GIFs are back, man.
GIFs are back. Yeah. This is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's interesting because, like you said, people like animations. So they start using it.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Do you think on mobile apps, you have more of that culture? Like I see it much more mature on apps. So a lot of people say, the experience in mobile apps is better than experience in web. When I talk to like people that are not professionals, people that are not professionals, I say like, show me. And usually they're talking about animations. Like usually when I talk to people and say like, explain to me, like, and they're like, see, it's smooth and then it goes here. And I was like, So do you think that is it easier? Like, I don't know. I don't program mobile apps. Is it easier? Is it simpler, or is just like a cultural thing?
Yeah. So basically it's a need, because when we are using mobile apps, we are almost touching the digital world. And then our brain expects that when you touch the screen and you drag, that thing should move. If you move your finger faster, it's expected that should move faster. It's a lot of more motion because it's a need. Because let's say that if you want to drag something and that thing is not dragging, and then when you release, that thing goes, that will feel super odd. So that's why from the beginning, I don't know, but maybe Apple engineers, when they designed the first iPhone, they realized, we need to have that into consideration. And the first iPhone, they put it there already. And even the technology, they use a lot of the GPU for mobile. You can even use multiple threads and this kind of stuff. And yeah, on mobile apps, we have a better experience. But the API isn't that nice. Even though you can create fancy animations and Apple provides a lot of tools already and they are good and they are super performant, the API isn't that great. But then when we come to the web, the performance isn't so good. So, and we don't have enough tools. And that was one of my motivations because I can see, I could see that we have a lot of cool experience on our mobile apps, but not on the web. And before the mobile revolution, we only use the mouse. And experience the web with the mouse is a completely different experience because you click it and then something will happen. And then you go and you search for another thing, you click it and something will happen. But when we have a mobile website or a responsive website, you will touch the button, you'll drag something, and it's much better to experience it. And then when we do this, we cannot use a normal transition. So we cannot use CSS animation with duration because you don't know when the user will release a finger, what is the velocity of that. So then you need to start using physics in order to create better experience, especially when you are dealing with a mobile device or a physical device. Yeah, so I hope, and one of my motivations with React Morph was that I want that more and more people can create and build better tools so we can start using it. And copying and trying to replicate what we have on the mobile apps, I think it's a good idea. At least we have something to follow, and it works quite well. And when you use your, let's say, iPhone app and you're swiping and dragging, you're not really thinking about it. That's an animation. That's a movement. That's you touching. That's physics. And a good animation is the animation that you cannot notice, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think we should learn a lot with mobile app development.
Now I have another question that it's a little bit of a meta question to the podcast. Like React as a framework emphasizes a lot static states. So React is all about, I have a state, I have another state, I have another state. I remember our talk here with Dave Courcide. He was talking about the state machines that you put a lot of emphasis on the transitions, right? So it seems to me that transitions are a more like natural way to deal with animations, and React focus a lot on static states one after the other. So a question here, is React a framework that is not very animation friendly?
Okay, so first of all, the state is a big topic regarding animation because you need time in order to have animation. So you need 2 states at least. So there is multiple ways to handle states. You can use Redux, you can use XState from David. You can use even the routing system could be a state because you're changing from one page to the other. And there is a lot of great solutions over there. So React has already that built in and has a lot of good package. So I think because of that, if we try to use the pre-existing solutions and then we try to implement and use that with our animation solutions, then yes, React is a great tool for that. And that's what makes React Morph a good package, in my opinion, because it's not opinionated about how you will handle the state. You can handle the state wherever, however you want. So, and this API, by the way, I don't think it's even possible to do it with vanilla JavaScript or HTML because it's the way that React works. You have a if or you have a condition, and when it's true, that element will be mounted, right? And if the route it's the right one, the element will be mounted. But we don't have that concept with vanilla JavaScript or HTML. There is no concept of a DOM being mounted or an element being mounted into the DOM. So React is what makes React Morph possible. Maybe we can use something similar with Vue, probably, because they also have a life cycle system. But in fact, I believe that React simplifies this a lot and can help us to create better animations.
I totally agree. And like having done a lot of stuff just in CSS land alone, things get out of hand really quickly. The complexity just adds up really, really quickly. And React encapsulates all of the difficulties of transitioning between states, so you can reason on it. And it almost like React Morph is like the most React way of doing animation possible. Is like, here's the two states, here's how you morph between them, boom, done. It's all encapsulated into those separate pieces, and you don't have to worry about the complexity of the details.
Yeah, because creating a morph animation with CSS only would be super hard and will be super specific to something, because then you need to create keyframes, and that keyframe should go to an element. And then if you have two different elements, then you need to know the correct time to add that class and then remove that class. And if you add and remove at the same time, maybe the duration isn't over and then the animation will stop. So having the power of JavaScript helps a lot. And animating with JavaScript instead of just CSS class, it's also better, and also allows us to use physics. So that's another big advantage, because then you can use the velocity, movement, drag, or whatever, and add it to the animation. And I think React can help us a lot on that topic.
Yeah, it seems like animations in general, I guess, are kind of more of an imperative thing than a stateful declarative thing, right? So like, but maybe certain kinds of animations fit really well into the React paradigm. I think like the transitioning one element from one thing to another, or a bunch of elements from one state to another, works perfectly. And it seems like React Morph handles that really well. I wonder about like, for the more imperative stuff, like, do you still need some kind of escape hatch or something? Like if you want to move multiple elements and stagger them or do something like that.
Yeah, it's true. It didn't solve all the animation problems. So that's a good example, having a staggering element, and then you just want to make them appear in a sequence. You will need something else to do this.
Yeah. And maybe that's okay. I mean, maybe that's, because React is like state works 90% of the time, but every now and then you need something that's imperative. That's like, when this happens, trigger some other thing. And then for that, you've got use effect or whatever.
Yeah. And a good thing about React Morph is that since you don't need to worry about any CSS prop, you can have, let's say, a red square on the top of the page, and then you have a bigger blue square on the bottom of the page. And if you want to animate that with CSS, then you need to figure it out. First, you need to style the first element, and then you need to figure out what is the final position. Then you need to update the background from blue to red. Then you need to change the width or height or the scale, maybe. Then you need to touch in a lot of properties. But with React Morph, it will be done automatically, because it will put the two together and then it will transform one to the other. So it's even simpler, because then you don't need to care about any CSS prop. You don't need to care about anything like that. If you want to make a ball move around the page, and I help some friends to implement a solution like that while you're scrolling, a ball was moving and was stopping in different positions. With React Morph was super easy, because they just put like 5 balls in the page in the correct position, and then they apply the same morph to all of them, and then they just need to show and hide the ball in the correct scroll position. So when one ball was visible, it magically goes there, and then when the other was visible, it went there. Because React Morph has infinite states. It's state A to B, but if you appear another state, it will animate to that, and so on and so on.
Oh yes, you can have a chain of them. That's cool. So it's not always A to B. It's like you can have like A, B, C, D, whatever.
Oh, that's interesting. I need to think about that.
That makes sense, I guess. Yeah. So it's pretty much like wherever that morph object or spread of props appears, you're just going to animate to that, wherever that happens to be. Maybe it's the old one, maybe it's a new one.
Yeah, the only thing that we need to make sure is to have just one element at the same time on the page. So, and then it will animate to that. And actually, this was an interesting side effect. I wasn't thinking about it, but the way that hooks works make it possible. Because when the element with these spread props are mounted, I'm storing the current position. And then when another element is mounted, I'm looking to the previous position. So then I realize if I put another element there, it will look to the previous position, no matter what it was there. So it will always create this animation. And when I realized, I was like, oh, interesting. This works. It works.
That's awesome.
Okay.
I love hooks.
Magical.
Yeah.
What do we do before hooks, man?
This seems like if you've used the Keynote software on Mac, it's like the PowerPoint for Mac. It's got this like magic transform.
Magic move.
Yeah, that thing is cool. So it's like you like make 2 slides and it will just figure out like where the elements moved from one slide to the next. And that's kind of pretty much what React Morph is doing, right? It's like where did it move from one place to
That's the next version of React Morph. It just knows. Yeah, I think that's the only like next step from that interface is like it just knows.
Because somebody implemented Magic Move in Framer. I wonder if it would be possible to like quickly re-implement those animations for real using React Morph. I'll have to think of that.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Yeah, we just need a way to tag them. I don't know. Yeah, I can think about it. Pull requests are welcome.
I love a challenge.
So another thing about React Motion, you have some dependencies on pop motion, and you chose those libraries only for the equation, for the interpolations, or are you using another animation under the hood, animation library under the hood?
No, I initially I was using pop motion as a package, but then I'm just using pop motion popcorn, which is just utilities functions, things for interpolations, things like that. And another dependency is Wobble. It's a tiny Spring physics package. So these are just the two dependencies that I'm using. And the rest is, everything is just JavaScript and React.
Okay, nice. Regarding dependencies, just one quick fun fact here. Like as on another episode, I was working on a Java microservice now, and we needed to add a third-party dependency. And like from the front-end world, it's like, where's the npm install of this thing? And it's crazy. Like the whole ecosystem of the microservices in the company here at Compass has, I don't know, maybe 20 different third-party dependencies. And I was like, oh my God. In the front end is like, I have 20 every 30 minutes. It's crazy how these dependencies things change from world to world. It's not that common to use that many dependencies everywhere. So when I saw in your package, Jason, that you only have 2 dependencies, not dev dependencies, actual dependencies, I was like, this is nice. And you're barely using them.
Yeah.
This is good. Not populating our project. This is a big thing now, right? We need to think about, I don't know, security or anything like that. Is this library going to steal my Bitcoins? That's
yeah.
It's crazy to think about it.
1,000 paper cuts problem where and it's kind of like up to every library maintainer to do that, because it spirals out of control without like any one person doing.
It does. Yeah, it has a lot of responsibility now. Yeah,
you look at like those modules in a fresh Create React app, it's huge.
Yes, it is.
It does show the power of the ecosystem, though. I mean, remember before Node.js came out, before CommonJS unified the package concept, just like concatenating strings together. Oh man.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember I worked on other languages and stuff, the same kind of thing. I guess Java's a little better. They have a package manager, but like the C world before, I don't know if they have a package manager now, but when I was playing with it, they didn't. And it was just like, compile everything by hand. You figure out the dependency tree yourself and compile them all.
Have fun with that.
It was like, it was terrible. But also it motivated people to like build everything themselves. So like, if you want to,
and that's not a good thing in C.
Yeah, that's not great either.
Yeah,
it's all trade-off.
Right.
So what do you think about going to next? Now that Morphe is taking over the world, what's your next opportunity? Are you going to solve, like, state management is already a nightmare. Don't go there, but you've solved animations with Morphe. What's your next challenge?
No. I don't think it's solved already. I think we still need a lot of things to do on that matter. And I think, because it's still hard to... I think my biggest focus right now is trying to merge the design world with the development world.
Yes.
I'm been experimenting a lot of different tools, and I like to simplify things to people and to create better tools. And I'm also into this topic of design system. Internally at Ginetta, we are trying to create a good system that we can reuse, because it's so tedious when you have to start everything from scratch.
Yes.
So I want to focus on the good parts. So I don't want to design a button every time, or I want to be in the world that you can just focus on the good parts and you can create the fun things, and the repetitive, boring stuff that could be already done. So if we design a good system and we have a good system beforehand that we can reuse, then we can, start from a good foundation. And then what can we do in order to make this different, to win an award, to impress our clients, or, this kind of stuff. And if we create the good foundations, then we can focus on that part. And this is true especially for animation, because animation usually is put into the end of the line. If we have time, if we have budget, if the client wants, we can do this. But it shouldn't be like this. If we can say, hey, we have all the main features or the main repetitive tasks already implemented, then let's do this thing to make it really good, to make it shine, And that's my focus right now. Maybe it's too audacious, but I don't know.
Nice.
I want that on a t-shirt.
Developers are people just like us. And a lot of times they have really, really interesting stories about how they got into a programming language, out of a programming language, how they got into programming in the first place. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have a degree in music or have some affinity for music, or maybe they have a degree in something else like theater, and then they wound up getting into programming for other reasons. I actually used to work with a whole team of people that all had law degrees that wrote code. It's just interesting to me how people have come along in their careers as developers. So we have a show for you. If you are into JavaScript, go check out My JavaScript Story. That's at myjsstory.com.
All right. So I think now we can wrap up and go to picks. What do you all think?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's start the picks of this week with you, Dave. Do you have any picks for today?
Sure. So I've got one dev-focused one that I saw yesterday on Hacker News called DivJoy. So it's like a React project generator, divjoy.com. It looks pretty cool. So you pretty much you pick a UI component library and pick a backend authentication provider, and it generates a whole project for you that does a lot of stuff out of the box. And it seems like it's kind of early days. They only have a couple of providers for each thing, but it seems like they're probably going to build it out, and it's impressive. So it's more than just a generator. It also lets you kind of visually create the app and drag and drop stuff in a component tree. It's pretty cool. Check it out. And then once you get it all working, you can export a project.
Nice. All right. So Leslie, do you have any picks for today?
Yeah. I love the entire A Book Apart book series, but I recently picked up Resilient Management by, I think, Laura Hogan, who's phenomenal. I've watched a couple talks of hers. And I think even if you're not a manager or interested in going into management, it gives you some insight into how managers think and how to interact. And obviously, A Book Apart, it's usually tech books, right? So this is sort of geared towards folks in our industry. So highly recommend. I'm sort of in the middle of it. So it's a preemptive pick, but I'm enjoying it so far. And then in the world of pop culture, recently checked out Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm a little late to the game on that one. It was so good. We're talking about animation. Really, really phenomenal movie. Well done. Recommend it.
Yeah, that was an interesting movie. The visuals are great. All right, so Thomas, do you have a pick for the week?
What I've been reading lately is like old Carl Jung psychology books. Today or yesterday, I was reading Lectures on Jung's Typology by Mary Louise von Franz and James Hillman. Very interesting to kind of look at the history of personality psychology all the way back to its origins. And I'm on my YouTube channel, I'm kind of taking the latest and greatest understanding of all of this nerd personality stuff and seeing how we can use it to kind of optimize our personal performance and take ourselves to the next level instead of focusing so much on, personality problems. Just start with, well, I'm fine. And how can I get awesomer instead?
Amazing. All right. So my pick for the week is, from time to time, I try to keep my mind sharp. I try to read something that I'm barely understanding. So I always try to read something that is like a little bit too hard for me to understand. And now I have the perfect PDF from a Santa Fe professor called Simon Dedeo, and it's called Information Theory for Intelligent People. It's really interesting if you want to know a little bit more information theory. And there was one comment on Hacker News that was really on point. Usually Hacker News, they have these links and it's like a tutorial on information theory or like probability 101. And you start reading and on the second paragraph, you're like, I have no idea what's happening here. It's like, so usually those primer tutorials they say they're like the beginning of a really complex subject, but they get complex from the first moment. And this is named like For Intelligent People. And you can actually like read and understand at least the first half. The second half is really hard to me. So this is my pick for the week. And Bruno, do you have any picks for us?
Yes, I would recommend the FramerX documentation regarding animation. If you check the API, they did a great job to simplify, and they have really nice components. And if you check the Matt Perry GitHub Twitter account, he's sharing a lot. How can you use FramerX animations components in production? Even without FramerX, you can use it, which is super cool. And he's always sharing a lot of nice examples, and it's using hooks. So I would recommend that.
That's nice. All right, so this is the end of this week's episode. Bruno, thank you very much. It was really inspiring. The library is amazing. Everybody go watch the React Finland talk, and see y'all next week. Bye-bye.
See you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.